Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are jumping right into a highly complex, absolutely massive geopolitical shift centered around China, Taiwan, and the broader Indo-Pacific region. We're drawing directly from recent assessments by the U.S. intelligence community and the Institute for the Study of War. And as you'll see, the modern playbook for global power competition is really moving away from direct military action. Instead, the real battles are happening in parliaments, along shipping routes, and even inside tiny microchips. Let's dive in. Okay, so we have to start by confronting the elephant in the room. If you've been following global security even a little bit over the past few years, you've almost certainly heard a very specific year tossed around when it comes to Taiwan, 2027. I mean, it's been the subject of countless headlines, intense debates, and major defense planning sessions across the globe. We're talking, of course, about the Davidson window. Back in 2021, Admiral Phil Davidson warned that 2027 was essentially the deadline set by CCP General Secretary Xi Jinping for the PLA to, quote, be ready to invade Taiwan. It's basically been the ticking clock that has completely defined Allied security policy ever since. But hold on, because there's been a pretty massive shift in perspective lately. According to the newly released ODNI 2026 Annual Threat Assessment, they state, Chinese leaders do not currently plan to execute an invasion of Taiwan in 2027, nor do they have a fixed timeline for achieving unification. That is huge. It tells us that while unification absolutely remains the ultimate goal, an immediate, conventional D-Day-style assault isn't the primary plan right now. So that begs the question, if not a direct invasion, what exactly is the immediate threat? Well, to figure that out, we're going to break this down into 5 key areas today. Rethinking that timeline, looking at political infiltration, uncovering some underground AI chip smuggling, examining Japan's defense shift, and finally, checking out the flashpoints in the South China Sea. All right, part 1, rethinking the timeline and looking at short-of-war coercion. Here is the absolute crucial point you need to take away from this. Just because there isn't a strict 2027 invasion plan definitely does not mean there's an absence of aggression. It's just that the strategy has morphed. The primary threat has shifted away from immediate conventional warfare toward what analysts call gray zone coercion. This means we're seeing narrative, economic, and political pressures being relentlessly applied all across the Indo-Pacific. The whole objective here is to set the conditions for unification by basically wearing Taiwan down and pushing its allies back without ever actually crossing the line into a full-scale war. Which brings us to part 2, infiltrating Taiwan's political sphere. Essentially, the inside job. And guys, this coercion isn't just theoretical wargaming, we are literally seeing it play out in the courts right now. Recently, Taiwan charged a campaigner for the opposition TPP party with violating their Anti-Infiltration Act. Prosecutors are alleging that she was actually recruited by PRC handlers to specifically target mainland spouses living in Taiwan. And the assessed goal of all this? It's highly strategic. They aim to sway public opinion ahead of Taiwan's 2026 and 2028 elections to deliberately reduce the influence of the ruling DPP, who have been heavily pushing for defense reforms. You can see how this kind of internal political maneuvering directly impacts national security. Right now, Taiwan's legislature is completely deadlocked over a special defense budget. Just look at this incredible gap. The ruling executive yuan proposed a 1.25 trillion NTD budget, while the opposition KMT and TPP proposed somewhere around 380 to 400 billion. That lack of consensus has thrown the entire budget into total gridlock.
Now, you might be wondering, why does a budget gridlock halfway across the world matter to the wider region? Well, it has very real, tangible consequences. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense stated that failing to pass this budget is delaying the purchase of 8 vital U.S. weapon systems. And we're talking about highly effective stuff here, like Javelin and Tau missiles, all delayed until late 2026. So the political friction happening inside Taiwan is quite literally stalling its military readiness on the ground.
Okay, let's shift gears to part 3, the underground AI chip smuggling. The tech front. Look, it's no secret that whoever controls artificial intelligence is going to dominate the modern geopolitical landscape. And to run advanced AI, you need the absolute best cutting-edge microchips. The US put strict export controls in place, specifically to prevent the PRC from getting these exact chips. But a massive smuggling operation was recently busted by the US Department of Justice, and the route they used was incredibly brazen. Step 1. Supermicro in the US legally sells servers loaded with advanced NVIDIA chips. Step 2. They ship them to a company in Southeast Asia that's just posing as the final user. Step 3, once there, they are secretly repackaged into completely unmarked boxes. And Step 4, shipped straight to the PRC, totally bypassing those U.S. export controls. To really wrap your head around why the Justice Department had to step in, you just have to look at the sheer scale of this thing. $2.5 billion. That is the estimated value of the servers bought by this one intermediary between 2024 and 2025 alone. 3 individuals affiliated with Supermicro ended up being charged with conspiracy. It really highlights a massive, gaping vulnerability in the global tech supply chain. But here's the thing, smuggling is risky. So there's another perfectly legal way around the rules. PRC companies are increasingly just building their own data centers right there in Southeast Asia. Because those countries aren't banned from accessing advanced U.S. chips, Chinese tech firms can essentially set up shop and rent the computing power remotely to train their large language AI models without breaking any laws. This open development strategy is making the PRC more and more independent of cutting-edge hardware restrictions. And it's gotten to the point where U.S. senators are now demanding a total review of export licenses to the entire region. Moving on to part 4, let's zoom out and look at Japan's strategic defense shift and how the regional dominoes are falling. You better believe Japan is watching all of this extremely closely. And they aren't just watching, they're acting to insulate themselves. The Maritime Self-Defense Force just went through a historic structural overhaul. They've consolidated 3 surface groups to centralize their naval assets. But the real game changer here is a brand new amphibious and mine warfare group based in Sasebo. This specifically positions them for a rapid response to the southwestern islands, which directly restricts the PLA Navy's ability to easily access the Western Pacific during a crisis. And this military restructuring is being backed up by some heavy diplomatic realignment. In a recent meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi, both leaders firmly reaffirmed their alliance and their commitment to stability across the Taiwan Strait. They also announced the deployment of U.S. Typhoon missiles to Japan, and Japan is setting up a National Security Investment Review Board to block risky foreign capital. Naturally, the PRC has reacted strongly to all of this, framing it as aggressive militarism. Beijing retaliated by imposing economic pressure, restricting imports, and prompting Japan to actually downgrade its diplomatic ties with China. So yeah, the dominoes of regional alliances are shifting, and they're shifting fast. Which brings us to part 5, flashpoints in the South China Sea, where all this political posturing turns into actual pushback on the water. We are seeing some truly intense moments of friction out at sea. Take a look at this recent confrontation near Sabina Shoal. You literally had a PLA Type 056A corvette lock its fire control radar onto a Philippine vessel. Now that is a highly provocative move, usually designed to seriously intimidate. But the Philippine vessel was the Miguel Malvar, a modern, newly purpose-built guided missile frigate. So instead of backing down, the Miguel Malvar issued a very firm radio challenge, and the result? The PLA vessel actually stowed its radar. It's a brilliant illustration of how, as regional navies modernize, they're suddenly becoming capable of standing their ground against lower-end coercion tactics. But as crazy as that sounds, it's just one incident in a highly congested, incredibly tense environment. Over near Mischief Reef, PRC forces recently fired flares at a Philippine Coast Guard aircraft that was just conducting a maritime awareness flight. In response to this mounting pressure, the U.S. and the Philippines conducted joint maritime drills right in Manila Bay. Meanwhile, further out in the Western Pacific, the PLA Navy has been actively rehearsing complex air and missile defense roles using their advanced Type 055 destroyers. Now, why would the PRC focus so heavily on air defense with these specific destroyers? Well, the intelligence assessment is that they've been studying recent U.S. military successes using electronic warfare to suppress air defenses in places like Venezuela and Iran. The PLA wants to make absolutely sure their network can survive that kind of attack. But doing this creates a real strategic dilemma for them. Think about it. If you dedicate your best Type 055 destroyers to an air defense role, you have fewer of them available to escort your aircraft carriers out into the wider ocean. That trade-off could potentially force Chinese carriers to stay a lot closer to their home shores during a conflict, which limits their ability to block U.S. intervention. All right, part 6. Let's look at the big picture and connect all these dots. So we started this explainer by pointing out that the intelligence community doesn't think a conventional invasion of Taiwan is currently planned for 2027. Instead, what we've unpacked today is a vast, highly coordinated campaign of short-of-war coercion. We're talking about infiltrating Taiwanese politics to stall their defenses, smuggling billions in AI chips to win the global tech race, and constantly testing the limits of international waters. But as nations like Japan and the Philippines rapidly modernize their own militaries to push back against this coercion, it leaves us with a truly critical, provocative question to ponder. As this region arms itself to counter these gray zone tactics, will this delicate balance of pressure maintain the status quo, or will an accidental miscalculation at sea trigger the exact conflict these tactics were designed to avoid? That right there is the true danger of the years ahead. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Until next time, keep learning and stay focused.